Okay, the microphone that doesn't work.
So we'll see if it comes back over now.
Farmers Market Board of Directors to order. Before we get into this meeting today, I just want a couple of drawing rules to be set here and some things for transparency. So each of the door is struggling repairing the door. So if there's some reason that the door is not working, the chamber becomes inaccessible with the meeting to another room, hoping it'll be fine. We didn't have the right folks, people to run it, so thanks to the people who stepped up to make sure we can use this room as it's much more accessible for meeting. Lastly, there's security in the room. Someone asked me about it at the beginning of the meeting, so I thought I would let everyone know. Since about the beginning of this year, let's say, Councillor Hoyne, we've had security in our meetings all the time because we've had people come in here with outbursts and say things that are absolutely inappropriate, things that are deeply disturbing. And so we have security at City Hall and have more of a presence at James during our meetings. Has a minute. Specifically, we'll be talking about the market manager report, governance and operational review implementation, and the fall 2026 York Boulevard activation. And if we've got time, and we may also reach private confidential matters today. Some delegations on the agenda. So before we get to those, I want to announce that delegates have 5 minutes each to present their delegation. That's pretty standard practice for items on our agenda. So delegates each have 5 minutes to present their delegation. If people have questions at the end, meaning if board members have questions of delegates at the end, they're by all means welcome. Ask questions. There's also a period at the end if people want to make comments, if board members want to make comments about the delegations. As a chair, my job is to make sure this thing doesn't get wild. We're all here our own time, so to speak. It gets out of hand on the internet. People are certainly welcome to clap if they approve of something somebody says, but we're going to try and keep the negativity to a minimum. I want to be mindful that delegations are a chance for people to raise issues to the board about the board's policies, and not a place or time to take up personal grievances with our staff or to come after our staff in any way. This is their workplace, and as the person chairing this meeting, it's my job to make sure the workplace is safe and that people feel safe in their workplace here at this meeting. So again, if it gets to a point where there's things being said that are inappropriate or people are saying things about staff directly, then I'm just going to ask them to stop doing that. If it persists and we can't get control of the meeting, then again, we'll just adjourn the meeting. So again, happy for respectful comments about the board's policies. That's what we're here for. We're here to have those conversations. I want to treat everybody with respect at this meeting. That goes both ways. We'll treat you with respect, same thing. On that note, first is the approval of the agenda, item number 1. I have a seconder to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Member Rose. Any questions, suggestions, amendments to the agenda for today? I'm not seeing any, so all those in favor of the approval of the agenda by show of hands? Everybody, that carries. We're on to declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest to declare? I'm not seeing one, so we'll move on. If something should come up later in the meeting where you feel like you have a conflict, just let me know, and we can note that. On to item 3, which are the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, February 17th, 2026. Can I have somebody move that we approve those minutes? I see Councillor Huang. I'll second that, so we can approve the minutes. Any questions, suggestions, changes, or edits to our minutes from the last meeting that we held? I'm not seeing any. Just looking again in case. Nope. Okay. All those in favor of the minutes from the last meeting by show of hands? And that is everyone. And those are carried. We're on to our delegations for today. And first delegation for today is Jeff Pichel. And Jeff, you're welcome to go up the front here to your delegation. You've got 5 minutes, and you can start whenever you get there.
I'm on.
You're on, yeah. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. My name is Jeff Pichel. I'm a vendor at the Hamilton Farmers Market and president of the Stallholder Station. I'm here today to speak not just about Dancy cheese, but what the situation represents for the market as a whole. Let me start by saying this clearly. It would be a significant loss to this market if Dancy cheese were to leave after more than 40 years. They're not just another vendor, they're part of the identity of this market. At present, the board is operating with 4 members instead of 11. Over the past year and a half, vendor and citizen positions became vacant through resignations and term completions. Vendors repeatedly asked to fill those seats through elections. Each time we were asked to wait for governance review with the understanding that a new board structure was coming. We respected that process and waited. When the report finally arrived, after this board was already in place, it recommended removing vendors as voting members. Vendors then had to push just to maintain some representation on a future board. At the same time, we were told the new structure would not take effect until late 2026, even into 2027. So for at least a year, excuse me, these positions have remained unfilled. Vendor representation has typically been reduced to a single member. Today, the board consists of 2 councillors, 1 vendor, 1 city member. That matters. Since that directly impact livelihoods and could lead to long-standing vendors leaving, should be made by a fully representative board. A board operating at one-third capacity raises serious concerns about balance, fairness, and confidence in the process. The attendance policy is being presented as fairness and consistency, but the Hamilton Farmers Market is not made up of identical businesses. We have producers, fishmongers, butchers, delis, bakeries, restaurants, and retail businesses all operating on different models with different peak days. A blanket requirement to be open all 4 days sounds fair, but it does not reflect how this market actually functions. And importantly, exemptions already exist. So the issue is not flexibility, it's how it's being applied. I want to be clear, I understand that the board has made commitments as part of the 2026 budget process, including ensuring the market operates 4 days per week. The vendor community is not asking to undo that objective. We're asking for a targeted amendment to one section of the policy, the requirement that all non-primary producers and farmers must be open all 4 days. Through a recent vendor survey with a 93% participation rate, which was done just last week, a few days ago, 9% support making Wednesdays optional. And importantly, 71% said that they would still choose to reopen. This demonstrates that vendors are not looking to reduce their presence. They're asking for reasonable flexibility within a 4-day operating model. Our proposal is simple. Require vendors to offer a minimum of 3 out of 4 days. This approach continues to support a 4-day market, aligns with the board's commitments, and ensures stronger overall vendor sustainability and long-term consistency. A 4-day market only works if the vendors within it can sustainably operate. A 3 out of 4 day model doesn't weaken that commitment, it makes it achievable. The market has adjusted its operating day before. When Friday was introduced decades ago, it began as optional before becoming standard. There is precedent for starting with flexibility and building toward consistency. We also must acknowledge the reality of the downtown core. Foot traffic has changed, costs have increased, and conditions around the market are more challenging than ever before. These factors directly impact days like Wednesdays. Recognizing that it is not lowering standards, it's responding to reality. There's also an important point about how attendance is being perceived. The market used to have over 60 vendors. Today we have 45. Stalls have grown larger. As a result, even a small number of vendors being closed can appear much more significant than it is. Furthermore, there are currently 5 vacant stalls in the market. At the same time, since 2022, we've seen steady turnover of vendors. This isn't just about who is open on a given day. It's about overall stability in the market. In closing, this is not about undoing the policy, but refining one part of it. Allowing flexibility on Wednesdays protects vendors, supports the market, and still maintains consistency for customers. Because without that flexibility, we risk losing businesses like Jancy Cheese. And that is not a win for anyone. I would strongly encourage the board to amend this section of the policy to allow vendors to operate 3 out of 4 days. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm not seeing questions, so we'll go to our next delegate, Christine Phillips. Oh, pardon me. Matthew, you had a question? Go ahead. Jeff, you may get a question.
Yeah, through the chair. Firstly, thank you, Jeff, for providing your perspective and perspective of the news. I'd like to, if possible, Chair, ask a question to the management team.
Yeah, we're going to do that at the end of all the delegations if there's questions for our staff. But we'll let all the delegates go forward, and if we have any comments to make at the end, and any questions for our staff at that time.
Thanks.
Christine, go ahead. You've got 5 minutes whenever we start.
Hello, everyone. You all know me, Christine Phillips, Romano's Cheese. The first time I've delegated, I'm a little nervous up here, so forgive me. So, in perspective to this policy, a few years ago, when it was first brought up that we would have an attendance policy, We kept hearing how customers were complaining. No one's here. No one's here to close. Well, honestly, this policy that allows you to be here 6 hours a day is actually, instead of getting rid of this problem, it's promoting this problem. Yancey Cheese, you want to shut them down for not showing up Wednesdays? Missing one day is the same as showing up 10 to 4 or 4 days. They're going to miss just as many hours in one day. I don't understand how this is fair to them in any way, shape, or form. Also, the whole policy, there's no compassion clause at all in it. We have older vendors who are facing health issues, have his permission, Fleet. He's 70. He's trying to make a living doing this. His health is not the greatest. He has been told there is absolutely no exceptions. He is not allowed to miss time. How is that? These hours take a toll on him physically. Also, in this policy, there's a sold-out clause. I've worked other markets. The whole point of a market is you come in, and if you can, you sell out and go home. According to the new policy, if you sell out many days, you now have to go to the office because you're underproducing. I just don't understand how this is legitimate. Like, literally, the point of a market is to come in and sell out. Another thing I keep hearing from different people is how malls have attendance policies, very similar to what you're trying to institute for us. The thing is, we're not a mall. We're small mom-and-pop operations. We are not chains and franchises who can just throw money out the door, pay people to be open whatever hours. And I honestly, our customers don't want us to be chains and franchises. They come to the market because they enjoy the socialization, because they enjoy the shopping. We know our customers. Cameron, when you got a new kitten, they walk up to the stand, it's like, hey Cameron, nice to see you. Congrats on your new kitten. Don't get that personalized somewhere else. If we get rid of stands like Andy, who's next? Again, this is kind of rambling, I'm sorry. I had it all written out, but again, we're mom and pop businesses. Unfortunately, we're not here to employ staff to cover all the hours. We're here to employ ourselves and our families. Speaking of family, our market is a family, both the vendors and our customers. I think I've made my point. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Christine. Are there any questions for Christine?
Oops, sorry.
I don't see any. Thank you so much for delegating, and we're on to our final delegate, which is Jennifer Humpoth. Whenever you're ready, you also have 5 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am a co-founder of Friends of the Hamilton Farmers Market, which is a group composed of citizens, vendors, and different people who care about the market as a flourishing public space in Hamilton, one that supports small business and one that supports cultural diversity and really recognizes, I think, the fact that there has been I think a clash in cultures between the way that farmers, vendors, rural people, who many of whom record what they do on butcher paper with a pencil, and don't come to meetings like this. So I'm really, really appreciative of all vendors who have shown up and take your own time on a non-market day to be here. And council and staff, I also know that you're the ones who are here, so you've been working really hard to try and make the farmers market a successful place. So I have no doubt that everyone here is actually on the same page. All of us actually want the market to succeed. So it's really important to recognize that the knowledge contained in this room, when vendors want to speak, when vendors want a seat at the table. But what we are seeing is really a reduction in the knowledge that's shaped policy. There are fewer people here. When the governance structure was proposed in 2011 to 2013, it was supposed to represent vendors and citizens actually relatively equally. And we see that right now that's not the case. So however that's turned out, we're actually missing a big piece of the knowledge of what it takes to run the Hamilton Farmers Market. So I know that typically in something like a mall, you would see everyone as just a vendor. Christine made the point really saliently that this is a family. Maybe it's not a family, maybe it's a bickering family. That's pretty like family to me. The fact that Christine, who stands to benefit financially from Jancy leaving, she sells cheese, is standing up, is not because of one vendor's desire to skirt a policy. It's really an issue of whose voices have been heard in the creation of this policy. Now, from 2023, the market was actually closed until August. Like, it wasn't fully open back to normal hours. And I think that we are actually in a state where we're trying to push the market forward. And as a consumer, I would love, I want to shop there, I want to be there. But there is the new normal, and the reality of the market on the ground is quite different. We have a new Coliseum that is now taking up a lot of customer space. As someone who relies on municipal parking, the lot being sold has made it super difficult. There's been all sorts of things, all sorts of challenges that the board is really aware of. But when I look at this vendor attendance policy, I don't think of things like customer confidence coming from the application of a policy that we are hearing from vendors is going to harm the market as a whole. And something I've learned actually as an advocate for the market is the market has different standards for different people. That's okay, because multiple standards can operate simultaneously. We know this. And I presented a report in 2019 to John Hertel and to this board that showed a picture of my child eating ice cream. This ice cream was not being eaten at 10 a.m. There were hours that needed to reflect the demand of different vendors. Ultimately, we have some constraints in how we've set up the market, right? So as a customer, I go in and I don't know, is this produce? Is this like a place I can sit down and eat? I actually don't know. And a lot of that is as a result of just a very haphazard reinsertion process of vendors in 2011. So I believe that finally, this is taking a toll on our public consciousness as a city. We are feeling like this is city versus vendors and consumers. I want to let you know, during COVID, when the market vendors were not accommodated, I managed to gather nearly 13,000 signatures from Hamiltonians saying that they wanted the city to provide rent relief to vendors. So there is clearly a larger cross-section of the municipality that cares deeply about the market. 13,000 signatures for 60 or so businesses is incredible. So I believe that as a regular shopper, it would be great to do deeper and different kinds of engagement. For example, are you tracking the business on Wednesdays? You asked me if I'd like to shop on Wednesdays. Well, usually not unless I forgot to shop on Saturday, because I would. So I think that it would be really great if market staff, for example, started tracking foot traffic on these days that we're saying are mandatory, and to see, for whom does this work? If it does not make sense financially for vendors to open, they cannot open. This is just it's a no-brainer.
You're a fair bit over your time. You want to wrap up?
Yeah, okay. Well, I just want to say thank you, and hopefully we'll have some good conversation as a result of this.
Thank you. I do see that there's a question from Shane. Go ahead, Shane.
Oh, hi, Jen. Thanks. I know you're regular on the market. I just wanted for the record, how long have you been shopping at market?
That would require that I would tell you my age. Like more than 3 decades.
Yeah, so it's a long time. So we love these type of people, especially moving forward with the new board. Vendors, the problem, we love people like Jen who shops at the market, and even Julie, who is our former manager, who comes to the meeting today. She would be perfect for the board too. But we want to see citizens that already love the market. Like, I think a qualification for being on the board or on the board of the future market board is we open it up to people that shop at the market would have an interest to sit on the board. And I think Jen got a great point. I don't think we've ever studied Wednesday to see, does it support businesses and everybody? Does it make sense financially? And I think there is a difficulty sometimes on Wednesdays with the traffic flow and hiring staff, and when we have so many people. So I don't know if I should wait to the end. I would like to make a motion at the end because I think we haven't studied Wednesdays, as Jen was recommending. Should I make it at the end?
Yeah, at the end.
Okay. Thanks, Jen.
Don't see other questions. Thank you so much for your delegation. At this time, I know that Matthew, you wanted to ask a question. Are you there? To our staff?
I am. Thanks, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So staff, first of all, thank you to all 3 delegates. Really appreciate their unique perspectives. I know that, and this is a question to staff. I know there was some very large bidding exercises with Engage Hamilton around 2022, rates sort of as we're slowly coming out of COVID. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit as to how those exercises informed your decisions around attendance policy. I know this envisioning included insight, opinions from the customer base. Could you speak a little bit as to how or if those envisioning exercises informed your attendance policy?
Thanks. I'll give that over to Adam Watson. Go ahead.
Yes, through the chair. I think both, I was not around actually when the visioning process took place. I think that there may be some others who can speak a little bit more in detail to it.
Or Adam, could you just tell everyone your title, just so it's on the record?
Oh, certainly. Adam Watson, Senior Program Manager for with the Planning and Economic Development Department for the Hamilton Farmers Market.
Thanks. Go ahead.
There isn't anything directly in the vision and guiding principles. I'm looking at them here right now that actually really does relate to this. Certainly indirectly it does, in that we are trying to, with the new vision, was really trying to reestablish the market as a more of a significant presence in the downtown, to be a focal point for us as for food, for local food in the city and in the local economy. There's a lot of more aspirational goals that you'll see in there, but you won't see anything really directly related to things such as attendance, vendor management, anything related to what we're speaking about here today. It's not actually really contained in that because it's more of a strategic vision about the future direction of the market.
Sorry, Matthew, did you have a follow-up question at all?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. So a couple things I wanted to summarize from the delegations I heard, a couple things I wanted to share in general about the process that got us here today. So this has been a process that's happened in two-year chunks, and then another 4-year period. So we have a governance review, which, if you know, is on the agenda today. So which means finally finished, which is good. Last year, when we got the initial plan back, it was suggested we go with a city process to implement it. That was going to take a while, and what we did instead was we said, can we use the same group of people who did the original consultation, have them carried on and do it quickly? So it's back, much more quickly than otherwise, so I'm glad for that. But it's annoying because it was started in 2021, and then a pause happened at some point, I believe during the pandemic, and then nothing picked up after that. So when we got here, we had a piece of the governance review, and they didn't have the other piece of the governance review. But it's now been completed. And the folks who are doing this governance review are experts in the area. We're going to just ask some random people to do it, just like we didn't ask random people to come up with a farmer's market vision. People who did the farmer's market vision and that consultation, which took 2+ years to do, were people who do that engage around the world on farmers markets. So they're coming with expertise, they're coming with having looked at farm markets in Ontario, in North America, and other places in the world, and saying what makes sense, what are other people doing, how are other farmers markets succeeding. And they did a ton of public engagement. So I wanted to say that a lot of public engagement was done, and we heard loudly and clearly back from the public about the kinds of things that they expect. And what we learned through that process, also through both the governance review and the other review we did, was that the city has a role to play with respect to how the public is engaged on the subject. And Shane's right to say that this should be an open process where we're inviting everybody in who wants to be a market vendor. I'll tell you, as the person who sat on the selection committee for market vendors, not for this specific round or the specific board, but in general, I do that work in my role as a councillor. I sit on the selection committee. We made sure this was publicly advertised very well, and lots of people applied, and we went through the whole discussion with them, and some of the questions were about experience. So that's an important thing. I want people to know that does happen, that will happen in the future, whatever that selection process looks like. So the governance review we get today, we'll talk a bit about that at a high level. 3 things I heard were looking at the compassionate clause, looking at 3 versus 4 days, looking at the sellout clause, and I know Shane has a motion he wants to bring forward on the foot traffic on Wednesdays. This policy didn't happen in isolation, magically out of the blue. That's suddenly now being enforced. It was something that was deliberated on. Every single vendor was in a survey twice, and then a survey by also the Stallholders Association to get people's feedback. When the policy was approved, the month before it was approved at that meeting, we had delegates standing up here. Some of you folks in the room, I remember being here, stood up here and gave us feedback and said, we looked at the vet policy and here are the changes we want to make. So what did we do? We took it, we sent it back to staff. Staff made the changes, brought it back, it got approved. So we went through a process, the same process we've been using, and we did this diligently and very carefully. We didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, we'd like to install a vendor policy. We made sure it came up a number of times, and there was lots of opportunity for feedback. That doesn't mean we can't change things or things can't change, or we can't get more feedback and do things. It has to be in line with the visioning for the market that everyone's approved and council's approved. It has to be in line with the governance review, which is going to council. So it has to be in line with those things. But I'm happy to put a motion forward, and I'll pass the chair to Councillor Huang, saying that have staff come back with a report on specifically addressing the concerns that were raised today and the reasons why the policy was done in that way, providing some evidence, providing some numbers, providing an opportunity for you to come here and speak specifically to those issues, because it's not on the agenda today. So I want to give you an opportunity to come and speak to those issues and hear some rationale from staff about why we put that policy forward, because we didn't just do it in a vacuum. It was written over years. Staff had good reasons for doing it. And we hear from people coming forward saying we want to see changes. So that's my motion, is to come back to staff saying, hey, can we look at a compassionate clause, look at the 3 versus 4 days, and look at the sellout clause, and just come back with a report on that to the whatever meeting you can come back to. I'm not expecting you can drop everything you're doing and do that, but come back as soon as you can to this body, and folks can come out and delegate and talk to that. So I'll put the motion forward if someone wants to second it. Councillor Huang, you're chairing, so I'll be quiet.
Okay, I'm happy to second it because I don't see Matthew online, so I don't know if he's willing to second, but I'll second it for now. And then if questions, comments, concerns? Matthew, do you have any questions, comments, concerns on the motion currently?
No, thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will call that to question currently. Matthew, I don't see you, so you have to either tell me whether you are yay or nay on this.
I am yeah.
Yes. All right, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. Chairs, back to you.
The only question I wanted to ask, in fairness, is when you think you come back with that. I think some of it's probably a repetition of previous reports that we've done, just gathering that information. Some of it might be new information to add or not add. Do you know when it's reasonable for you to come back? I don't have the meeting schedule memorized. I think our next meeting is May 19th.
Through the chair, yeah, I think our following meeting after that is June 21st, or you can check that, but I think that might be a realistic timeline. I wouldn't say next month necessarily, but it might be June.
Okay, I'm going to add that in there. Okay, thank you. Okay, written that down. And Shane, you wanted to put forward a motion? I think I know what it is, which is just that we, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I think you basically covered it. It's just that, yeah, different vendors differently, depending on their business, the number of competitors. So you kind of got it in there. They're going to come back with that.
Right, but you also wanted to put forward a motion to track foot traffic based on the day. And so I think right now we track foot traffic globally, meaning we track all the foot traffic in the report. I know Bill has that information already broken down by day. So are you asking that future reports also break it down by day?
Well, yeah, weekly won't cover it. Like, so if it's some people are having difficulties with Wednesdays with the flows, and I think that's what Jeff was saying when they polled the vendors. He didn't put it in. I don't know if you want to bring another meeting or something, the results with the vendors, or he can email you for information.
Add that as correspondence to our next agenda so it's on the record, right? Because we don't have it for today.
Yeah,
But if
people
you
are just
wanna add
asking
that-
mostly for just Wednesday, and that would solve the issue, I think.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll just, Bill, if that's possible, because you bring these for foot traffic reports back quarterly now, I believe, is that right? So next quarterly one, could you look at seeing Wednesday over a period of time, Thursday, like that kind of thing, like break it down by day?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Okay, so that's a motion moved by Shane, and Councillor Huang will second it. I think we understand what that motion is. Terry, do you think you have that? Just provide that foot traffic by day? I'm not sure how far back you can go, Bill, but I think you know what the exercise is. You've been doing the foot traffic reporting for some time. I'd say thanks to this board for that. It was a question that was asked in 2022 here that got that foot traffic reporting to start coming to the board so that people can see it. If you're looking foot traffic reporting, we have that online through all of our archive minutes. We have dozens to report on foot traffic so you can see what that looks like and how it's changing. On that note, I'm not seeing questions or comments about that motion, so all those in favor? By show of hands. And I'll wait for you, Matthew.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That carries unanimously. Okay, thank you for that. We're done with our delegations for today. We're on to items for information, which is item number 5. 5A, which is the market manager's report. Bill, would you do that, please? We're just going to take a moment while we get the laptops plugged in, and then Bill will give us his monthly market manager's report. Okay, take it away, Bill. Thanks.
So through the chair, just a quick run through on the market manager's report for this meeting. We've recently had one transition in the market. British Baked Goods transferred from their previous location to the now former cookie dough location. The request is made for additional space and improved visibility, which was granted. The vendor occupancy is on the rise. We've recently introduced 2 new vendors to the market. There's Nicholas Kempel under the banner of the Mushroom Tree. So it's an actual grower that's joined the market, and he's located adjacent to the artisan market. We also have Mita Dema of Yogurt Juice down in the lower level of the west end of the market, who's making juices for customers. So those are 2 new additions to the market. Given the recent changes made at the Hamilton Public Library, which is located beside us at the market, security's become an important part of what we do each and every day in the market. So we've really focused on improving the market experience by being able to monitor traffic in a number of different ways. One of the things that we've done is we've increased our full-time presence of security in the market, and that has done very well for us. We're also looking for other ways to monitor behavior in the market. The Hamilton Central Library recently installed Halo Smart sensors in their public washrooms. What these sensors do is they detect smoke, drug use, and particular types of activity in those areas. And we are currently investigating the addition of those monitors in our public washrooms. We've recently improved safety for our concrete stairs that connect the upper level to the lower level. We've had those recently striped to make them more noticeable for people that are moving up and down the stairs. This is a purely proactive measure. It's not related to any incident that's happened at the market, but it's worn off what has happened over the years, and it's much more visible now, and it looks great. And then just a quick update on the market parking. February and March, the Saturday or the levels for weekdays and the Saturdays have been fairly consistent from month to month, and we'll do a more detailed breakdown in our next meeting and show some historical data to go along with that. Are there any questions?
I'll turn it over to board members if you have any questions for Bill about his market manager's report. Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. Through the chair. Just a question with regards to those steps. I was there the day that the gentleman was working on them. They were concerned about the part on top of the stair. It's not risers, so the riser was gone ahead and got painted. But the steps itself, and I found that today when I was walking up them, they seem to be doing something. There seems to be like something is peeling off, or it looks like a bad tan. So I'm not sure if they painted or put this certain substance on the step. I'm not sure if that's staying there. I think it might be coming off.
Through the chair, that aspect of the plan recently met with facilities manager, and that is being addressed. So there'll be something done very soon with the top levels of those steps to give more grit, if you want to call it that, so that people can feel their feet under the on top of the concrete. So yes, we're definitely addressing that.
Thanks, Shane. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. The stall holders, we think the new security guard's really good. He escalates, he's dealing with trouble issues, and we've noticed a difference. First time in years I've ever said that. And also I'm wondering about the parking now that we're with this new owners of the property. I think we still have free parking on Saturdays, but I don't think it's so clear for our customers. Is it still free even when events are on for so many spaces?
Through the chair, it is. If they come to the market office, we can help them through that process, but yes, correct? Go ahead. Thank you.
Through the chair, when there's events happening at TD Coliseum, what the new owners are doing is they actually will ask the customers as they're coming into the parking garage, and if tell the attendant that they're going to the market, they're given a post-it note. They put it on their dashboard. They come into the market. They're parking exactly the same. They scan the QR code. They come to the office. We will assist them in that way. So they do get market parking. They get their 1 hour free, even if there's an event going on.
Thanks, that's helpful. Oh yeah, Jeff.
Just through the chair, just to follow up. We had a discussion about that parking. I'm not sure if the customers know that we still do have that, because there's still signage outside. Are they planning to take the old signage off, or are we putting new signage up? Or not we, but would the TD Coliseum people be doing that?
Through the chair, we are working through the process with the new owners. Yes, there will be new signage going up in that parkade.
Yeah, it helps to know. I tried to arrange new signage some time ago, but then the ownership changed with a notice, and so it would have been simpler to do it when the city owned it, but then the ownership changed, and now it's not owned by the city anymore. For those who are interested in the details about that, there's lots of stuff that's been written about that process by myself, by Joey, who's not in the room at the moment, about how those properties ended up in the hands of not being city properties anymore, ended up being exchanged for the work being done to get the TD Coliseum here. The Hupay Group now owns 3 properties. That's one of 3 that the previous city council gave to them in exchange for their work. So that's something we've known has been coming for a long time now in terms of the ownership. And so far it's going okay, but you're right, the signage issues, I think, are still outstanding. Yeah, it's confusing. I mean, I've been several times myself and I've used the app and it's still confusing for everybody. Any other questions for Bill on the market manager's report? Oh, Matthew, go ahead. Sorry, I see your hand there.
That's okay. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks. Can you provide an update on the broken door on the York Street entrance?
Yes, through the chair, we're still waiting on new glass for that door replacement. That one's not going to be really fast, unfortunately. It's going to be a custom order, and I'll provide an update to all as soon as I get an ETA on that. I've met with the facilities manager last week and got an update, and the update is that there is no ETA yet on that door repair, but we're hoping it's going to be sooner than later.
Thanks very much for that. I see no more questions for you, Bill. Thanks very much for your report. We're now on to 5B, which is the governance and operational review implementation. At the end of these 3 items, we'll receive all these reports for information. And I'll let you take that away, Adam. And we have our consultants here online.
Hello.
Sorry, Adam, before we get into it, I just want to say that typically what has happened in the past is things like governance review of this nature would go directly from the consultant straight to council. In this term of council, what we've done is if there's a report that is affecting the market in any kind of way, it comes here first. That way everybody here gets a chance to look at it and see it. And then we can make a recommendation to council from here if we want to. We don't get to approve this either way, it's not our choice, but we get to make a recommendation. Just so you know, this was something that came back to us earlier. We made a bunch of recommendations to council, they accepted them all, and that's kind of what we've been doing. So there was an opportunity for instance, for us to say things like, we want to ensure there's a space for vendors, those kinds of things. So we were able to put that forward. That's our job here today. Listen to this. And if at the end of it, anybody wants to forward a recommendation, they can do so. That recommendation will then go to council and then council will make a decision. I'm not sure we're doing that today, but I'm just saying that's our option today. Go ahead, Adam.
Great, thank you. Through the chair. So Councillor Crouch has provided the background, which you'll already see a little bit on the slide here. We'll just give a brief introduction and then introduce Mike, our consultant, to take you through the implementation phase, the final phase of the governance operational review for the Hamilton Farmers Market. So we're responding to the direction that the voting member, which is City Council, directed us to, as the last iteration of the governance operational model, recommendations put forward last year, last March. Staff directed to then continue to retain SDR, the consultant, to work on the implementation plan for the new governance and model, which is what we'll be bringing today. Worked with a variety of different staff groups and consultants in the city, trying to really come up with a plan that really encapsulates all the direction that provided with the governance review, so we can actually operationalize it and get things in place and really move to the next phase of how Hamilton Farmers Market is governed and operated on a day-to-day basis. So at this time, I'll introduce Mike Bujaya from Alberta CDR, who was the project lead on this. He'll take you through the main findings, and then I will just come back at the end with a bit of an overview of the implementation timeline. So take it away, Mike.
Thank you, everyone, and to the chair, thank you all for having me here today. Apologies I'm not there in person, but thank you for making me able to. My name is Mike Bajia. I'm a senior manager at Optimus PR. I was the
Mike,
lead
just
on
one
this.
second, if you don't mind. Sorry, we're just getting a fair bit of feedback, so I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'll ask if someone can be muted. Sure, just wait. That does make a difference. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. As I was saying, my name is Bajia. I am a senior manager at Optimus PR. I'm a co-lead of our municipal practices as well. I had the pleasure of getting to work with Adam and the team at the market on this next phase of the review for the farmers market. And so what I'll do today is I'll give you a summary of why we started this process, which Adam and Councillor Critch have already given some insight into, and then we'll go through some key elements of what we are proposing for the future state of the market. So with that, Adam, if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. We can jump to this slide as well, and we'll get right into the market's journey. So the next slide that you're going to see here really is an overview and a reminder. So you heard Adam mention, and we can jump right to the next one, Adam. You heard Adam mention the 2024 decision, I believe was the time for the market. So it was in March, and we did a review of potential operating models for the market, governance models for the market, and you can see a few of the three main ones that were looked at there. So the first was, should the market become an internal division of the city? This is similar to some other markets that exist. A group like a St. Lawrence market would fall into it. And we looked at pros, cons, and you can see from our assessment of this that it didn't seem to be the best fit for the market. The third option that you can see there was a community-based for-profit. So essentially, fully out of the municipal realm, and instead having it just operate as its own independent not-for-profit body. And there was some, I'll say, some positive there compared more to that internal vision. But as we looked at it, really, the arm's length agency or the municipal service corporation in particular model appeared to be the model that had the best fit opportunity for success moving forward. For those of you unfamiliar with what a municipal corporation is, as the name suggests, it is an arm's length body of the municipality. It can have some of its own structures and functions. It can have its own business-based board. It can create its own operating cadence, and depending on its structure, will determine, I'll say, the level of dependence it has versus support it receives. Now, one very key and important piece is that in the development of a municipal services corporation, these organizations ultimately have a single voting sole shareholder, and that would be the municipality. So in this instance, the City of Hamilton, via City Council, ultimately have the final say in terms of what is or is not permitted, and that is codified and defined in something called the Shareholders Directive, and then it's further reinforced in various frameworks and other elements. And so in 2024, the decision at the time was the Municipal Service Corporation model was the model that would continue to be, because it is the model that you have there today, but a restructure to align both within municipal as and importantly with leading practices for farmers markets. And so that is a bit of the context in where our review came into play. The next slide. To give a bit of context into what our project was actually designed, what that would like and how we would. So to the next project success factors on the left-hand side, and we talk about the project mission. What we're talking about is the nuts and bolts. It's what you've asked us to accomplish. And so for this project, it was ultimately support the city and in implementing the council recommendations, which we saw, aimed at strengthening the market's governance, operational sustainability, and long-term viability. That was essentially the nuts and bolts, and you'll see how we get to that in a second. And in terms of success factors, these aren't necessarily specifically those elements or those deliverables that you'll receive, but rather it's the intangible elements that you receive at the end of this process, and the city and the market would have if we complete this project in a way that all parties deem successful. And so you can see here there'd be a refreshed governance framework, which would improve role clarity, roles and responsibilities, oversight. There'd be an evidence-informed 5-year business plan, which can help with the operation and long-term sustainability. Future state organizational structure, ensuring essentially that the farmers market is set up in a way that will help staff and will ensure that there is continued support and that there is a lot of people that make the market great today, including vendors that are there. And then lastly, ensuring that everything we do, we transfer into the markets team so that when we leave, the market is able to operate in an efficient and effective manner, and that they can take its next step with confidence. Ultimately, that our goal is when we leave and you're successful, we've done a really good job, and that's what we're hoping to do today. On the right-hand side, you can see the 4 points here that we'll go through its presentation. And so, this is an overview as we're going through it right now. We'll talk through proposed governance structure as well as a maintenance skills matrix. We'll talk through some of the city support services and what that looks like, and then just highlight what the 5-year plan looks like as we go through. So with that, we can jump to the next slide. Thank you. And so from the question of how did we help the market? So ultimately, you can see 3 core here. So it's market governance, a 5-year plan, and then it's supporting structures and operations. So from that, from the market governance perspective in particular, ultimately the governance was seen as being currently hamstrung and a little bit weak from the perspective that there was a reliance on the city to support decision making, to support the strategic elements, and there's a goal that ultimately the market is able to stand on its own with less government and or no government intervention. And so in terms of what we did there, we reviewed the governance structures, we looked at the markets, we looked at other MSCs. We did our best to try to make sure that we were aligning with various structures. So we looked at city division as well as organizations to understand how they operate and how this works. And then from the other MSC's perspective, looking at where are there ways to make this efficient or effective, or are there pitfalls that others potentially fallen prey to. And then additionally, we looked at and developed and defined a structure to ensure that what you have today and in the future will align not just with the reality and the nuances of Hamilton, but also will align with leading practices. Because we want this to be evidence-based, as you saw on the previous slide. And so the impact is we've created a refreshed governance structure, which we will walk through in a second. And then we've created a refreshed mandate as well as terms of reference for the board and for subcommittees of the board to provide greater clarity in terms of what we do and what next steps are. In terms of the second one there, that 5-year business plan, so the goal ultimately was creating a business plan that would provide longer term, and longer term being 5-year in this case, but longer term insight into how are we going to achieve our goal, how are we going to achieve our vision, and you'll see what that looks like in terms of a vision in a couple of slides. But in terms of what we did, so we helped define a future state vision for the market, and that was through work with market leadership, and then we created scenarios and options and put that together into a business plan to show the impact this would be. And so ultimately, as you'll see in a second, there's a goal that we are going to have a community hub mindset for the market. We will be an organization that can operate as a community hub, but at the same time, we are going to be focused on revenue enhancement and revenue generation so that the market can then reinvest itself to support the experience patrons would be receiving in the future. I know was obviously something that was talked about quite frequently in the delegations before myself. And then the last piece was around structure and operations. So right now, there were some challenges when it related to structure and operations. Ultimately, there was some confusion, there was some potential room for improvement while ensuring that there's still autonomy for market and market staff. And so we met with the city and various departments to understand how the market relates to those other departments. We have identified where there's new structures that may be required, and we've started to think about where's their follow-on collateral, whether that be processes, standard operating procedures, whether that be agreements, MOUs, the shareholders directive, etc., for the market in the future. And so you can see down there in the last box on the bottom right, so we've defined the list of next steps, we've identified necessary SLAs, and we've worked through the development of, at a high level, at least the staffing model and how we can structure that in a way that ensures clear accountability and responsibility from the board through to staff and through to execution. And so if we go to the next slide, thank you. And so now we'll share a little bit more beyond that summary level view as to what this actually looks like. So the next slide, and we'll dive past this. A lot of title slides, and I apologize for that. So we'll start with the governance structure. What you're seeing here is a visual depiction and a structure that we're considering for this. So you can see the problem sentence there. The existing governance structure was unable to operate without city intervention. And what we're suggesting at this point is depicted in the graphic, but described in the various boxes here. So ultimately what we're looking at is from a membership for the board itself, is individuals from the Hamilton community who match the board skills matrix to assist the board in fulfilling its mandate. Now, a couple of pieces that you can see here. So 7 public directors, 1 city employee, 1 city council director, and then an ex officio vendor representative would be included on this. Now, in terms of that recruitment process, I heard an individual earlier on the board say a qualification for the market board and the future board should be that you have to love the market. That's definitely something we can look at and we can consider. In terms of the actual process for how members would be selected, we would want to ensure that we're still aligning with the clerk's department process on how members are selected. Now, in terms of skills and expertise, things that we would be looking at here and considering would be elements like if there's experience with markets or similar organizations, economic development, experience or expertise, business, financial, marketing, social media, things along those lines that would essentially be those core skills and those core elements that will provide market staff with the necessary insights and expertise they need to be able to operationalize and execute a vision that the board would have. The board mandate is essentially a short form here in terms of what's the focus of the board. And so I will read this one verbatim, and I apologize if it's to make sure that it's understood as to how we're envisioning it right now. And so it would be the board of directors is responsible for ensuring that the market is an effective hub, an attractive place for visitors to spend time and money, and an attractive public space for vendors to sell their goods. You can see there, it's really high level. It sets a strategic goal. It sets a mandate and a target for the group, but it does not provide the board the opportunity to get into the nitty-gritty operations of the market. Rather, we're seeing this board as being a governance-based board that provides strategic direction and then allows the market and its leadership and its staff to operationalize and execute that in accordance with the appropriate, I'll say, policies and procedures of the city as a whole. Now you can see there that at the bottom, there's subcommittees and an advisory board. And so from a subcommittee perspective, we're looking at 2 standing committees. So there'd be a governance and risk committee, and then there'd be a finance and audit committee. Those two subcommittees would be led by members of the board who have those necessary skills and expertise. But then we would have 2 ad hoc committees as well. So the first one being strategy. So if, every 5 years the board wants to create its own strategic plan, or 3 years, or whatever cycle the board feels is appropriate for itself at the time, we would strike up a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee that would be for strategy. Similarly, if there's infrastructure work or fundraising work that needs to happen, that's when a an ad hoc subcommittee could be struck for that as well. And what we've done in some of the work that you would have seen us reference on the previous slide is we've developed some terms of reference, we've developed some content to provide some guidance and structure. How does this look and how does this operate? Now, from an advisory board perspective, we are suggesting that there's a community advisory board. So beyond the fact that we would have members of the board, public members of the board, being appointed and members of this and be people who know and love and appreciate the market, we would still want, as best we can, to have a community advisory board that would be made up of residents from all of Hamilton, so that we can ensure we're not just only getting cherry-picked information from those who know the market best or who are adjacent to the market or in close proximity. Rather, we can then take that insight and that thought process of, if you're someone who lives further afield in Hamilton from the market, what could be something that would bring you into the market? What types of events or what types of activities would entice you to join? Things along those lines. And so we have created that as a feeder, I'll say, body. They're an advisory board because they don't have voting members. They would be coming to the regular intervals to share their insights, findings, updates on what's happening. Things along those lines could be consulted by the board and or leadership as necessary. In terms of what this ends up looking like, you can see ultimately the structure of this is that City Council still holds overarching roles, responsibilities, and decision-making powers of the board and of the market broadly. But having a councillor on it would help create that tie and that, I'll say, closeness to the to City Council, so that there's always an understanding of what's happening. And then through the City Department, that would be essentially ensuring that there's always a linkage to city operations, so that way if there's ever a need for special support or if there are challenges or issues that are facing, the board and the market itself will have that tight linkage. And so through this, there is essentially a core reporting structure to City Council and what would ultimately be an informal and informational reporting structure via the city employee as well as that City Council member. So this is the, I'll say, this is the governance structure that we're proposing at present. If we go to the next slide. So we want to walk you, thank you, Adam, want to walk you through a little bit in terms of the future market vision. So we had a discussion with the market, talked through what do we want the market to look like in the future. And the two, I'll say, ends of the spectrum really were a community hub or a municipal revenue driver. And this is an important question to know because we want to ensure that we're then creating a business plan that aligns with that goal and that vision. You can see ultimately the final result skewed more towards community hub than a revenue driver. And so we looked at these 6 facets that you see on the slide there in the table below the slider. And while there were some elements that we do want to focus on revenue growth and revenue driving, there was much more focus and attention placed on, and I'll say stress placed on the community hub elements of it all. And so this ultimately creates a business first mindset, but at the same time, if you're the public, what we want people to think about is how do we bring the market as a core community hub. So if there's things happening downtown, we want the market involved. We want people to want to come to spend time here to see what's going on and to be able to connect friends with businesses, etc. That said, we still want to ensure that we're not, I'll say, just forgetting all elements of, I'll say, proper business planning and operations. And that's where some of these slight elements around a municipal revenue driver come in. And so with that, I'll say, overarching goal and structure in mind, that's where we then move to how do we make that a reality. And if we go to the next slide, Adam, what you'll see ultimately is strategic priorities. So financial resiliency, market vitality, targeted vendor supports, operational clarity, and then accountability and governance. So to define these a little bit more in terms of what they mean. So from a financial resiliency perspective, ultimately we want to create a predictable and resilient revenue base that supports ongoing operations and future investment. So we want to have an organization that is able to also stand potential downturns in public activity. We want to ensure that we have the appropriate supports and labor revenue coming in so that we are able to provide a good experience for the community who comes to the market, while at the same time supporting the vendors who are there. Market vitality really looks at the market's role as a destination through programming, partnerships, and vendor diversity. So how are we bringing people in? How do we entice folks to come to our market, whether you are a resident of the city of Hamilton or whether you are a visitor who says, I need to check that out. Target vendor supports. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is how are we supporting vendors in a variety of fashions. And this includes new emerging vendors as well as long-standing folks with various support mechanisms. And so a piece of this that you would then see and hear about would be things like an incubator program or other elements, and how do we support a newer emerging business to come to the market, try something for a time down period, see if there's success, and if this is something that can, I'll say, stand on its own 2 feet in the public. From an operational clarity perspective, ultimately aligning programs, staffing, and resources with strategic intent. So if and as the board says, this is the way we want to move strategically as an organization, and that's based on any number of inputs and findings, whether that be vendor, community, and or other data sources, how do they then take the overarching goal and then create planning or operationalize and execute on that at the staff level, while at the same time still aligned with the realities and the needs of the city of Hamilton. And then lastly, that accountability and governance. Ultimately, it's ensuring that performance is monitored and the business plan remains a living document. So as the board assumes its role as that governance-based strategic board, we keep that line of sight into our business plan. Are we achieving it? Do we need to call an audible? Do we need to start thinking things differently because what we thought was going to be a reality is no longer? The world has changed, things along those lines. So that's really from the priorities of how we developed the business plan, what we thought of, and what that looked like. If we go to the next slide. So in terms of the operating model and the implementation plans, ultimately when we're thinking about the operating model, there's 3 main pillars that you can see here. So there's stall revenue, enhanced programming, and an incubator program. So one of the pieces is that we want to align the market stall fees to fair market values over a 5-year time. We recognize that if we were to say today, we need to jump the price up of any stall holder's lease by X% to get to fair market value, that's untenable. That's not necessarily realistic. And so we want to do it over a phased timeline. But when we looked, there was some, I'll say, fairly reduced rates right now being offered for potentially prime locations. And so we want to see how we align that with a more realistic and fair market value, while still making space to support our vendors and our stall holders. Enhanced programming really looks at how do we get more people into the market, is the programs we can run. There's that large programmable space at the front of your market along the streetscape there, which I know in the summertime sometimes can be opened up with the into the public or into the street. How do we take advantage of that space? How do we have unique activities that bring more people to the market, which will then increase the amount of people buying things and the success of our vendors, and will create that community hub model at the same time, people wanting to be there at the market. And then lastly is that incubator program. So with I'll say some relatively structured criteria for newer emerging vendors, how do we provide time-bound support? So how do we say for X number of months or years, you are going to have reduced stallholder fees, and we'll waive extra Y, we'll support you with extra Y to see, does this new business idea or this model that you're trying have legs, have what it needs to be successful? And if it does, how do we then transition you to a longstanding member of our market, or how do we support you to move out into the community in an effective way? And you can see in terms of an overall structure, Adam will give a little bit more of this at the end, but ultimately across 5 years, the first year ultimately is foundation and stability. So how do we start to get our feet underneath us, and how do we really start to organize this so that we have a solid base to build off of? Years 2 and 3 is activation and scaling. So that's really now we start to implement some of these pieces. We start to move things forward, and if something started as a pilot, we start to scale it larger and larger and larger. And then years 4 and 5 is optimization and strategic review. So the optimization piece being, maybe as we were scaling something, we need to change, or we need to tweak, or we need to course correct in some way. Let's do that. But then ultimately, let's take a retrospective. Let's say, how did this work? Do we need to make changes before we start thinking about our next 5-year cycle, our next 3-year cycle? Is there something we need to do to make ourselves more successful? Is there something that worked really well that we want to replicate in other programs or other areas? And that's ultimately, as we're looking at the implementation and operating model, those three pillars that we're focused on through our review, all of which is to move to the next piece. I'll move through the remaining pieces relatively quickly, but from a supporting structure and operations perspective, if we go to the next slide. Ultimately, we looked at 4 different pieces. So we want to make sure that there is a staffing structure that ensures autonomy for staff, while at the same time operates within the collective bargaining agreement boundaries and makes a very clear relationship with our city departments. So from a staffing model, we wanted to have an appropriate model. Ultimately, what we looked at here was ensuring that the staff maintain as city staff, and we find a structure that allows, in the current instance and structure as it exists now, the board to instruct Adam to then instruct staff, and there to be no possibility that you can have conflicting or competing demands provided by others within a potential chain of command. We did look at other groups, and we did find that City Housing Hamilton has a model that's actually quite appropriate and we think would fit nicely with the market. And so we've worked with HR a little bit to start to define that. The market will take that, I'll say, the rest of the way. But ultimately, there may be a change in terms of some of the roles and titles as we go forward. So, as an example, the current senior program manager role may be positioned as executive director if we were to align it with the structures of other operating models and governance models of other farmers markets and MSCs. We would then need to make sure that we're aligning this with other policies, things like procurement, etc. That maintain benefits piece. So when we were back in 2024 going through this process, there was counselor guidance that suggested that the staffing model needs to maintain the benefits and the supports that staff are already receiving today. We didn't want to create a brand new world in which they're going to lose benefits and lose their other pieces. And so as we go through this process, simply changing, I'll say, the overarching reporting structure, but still maintaining the staff as city staff, will maintain the collective bargaining agreement and will maintain the benefits that they receive. The delegations of authority, ultimately, so we'll need to, as we look at potential transition in market leadership, and as we implement the new structure more towards that City Housing Hamilton model, we'll need to look at the delegations of authority, because we want to make sure that that'll help sign off, it'll help procurement powers, it'll help all sorts of pieces to ensure that the market has stability and direction as it moves forward. And we're doing so in a way that aligns with leading practices while also aligning with the needs and the context and nuance of the City of Hamilton itself. And then lastly is foundational supporting documents. So the first one there is the shareholders directive. You heard me mention that earlier. That is ultimately the agreement between the market and the city, i.e. City Council, on what the market will be doing, what it won't be doing, what it has transferred to it, what it doesn't have transferred to it, what the city still maintains as a responsibility, what the market has to present back, how often, all of those things. That'll be ironed out in that document. And then for each of the supporting departments and supporting groups, think things like finance, like a procurement, like an HR, or facilities as well. It's creating service level agreements where we say, here's the services that the market will be receiving from your department. Here's at the cost of what, and here is, for example, how quickly we would expect a response to issues such as X or Y. And so it's defining those, and through our process, we started those, and we've developed some guidance for what the city may want to consider. But the actual development and finalization will be something that the marketing team will work through and ensure that it goes through proper legal review, etc. And if we go to the next slide, ultimately, that's what we've created. That's what we wanted to present today. I know it's a lot of information. I'm pretty sure I went over a time that was given to me, and I apologize, but I thank you all for humoring me as we went through it. I'm happy to take any questions or comments at the time.
Thanks. I think there were a couple more slides I to present briefly. Is that right? Just one. Okay, go ahead, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, just as a really brief timeline overview. Obviously, this has been an ongoing process. It's taken quite some time. We are trying to expedite the process as much as possible to actually get these changes implemented, to get our structure in place, and have our new structures in place that will really help the operations of the market. So just as a quick overview, we're here today presenting to the board of directors of the farmers market, getting your input, and then we are developing the staff report that will go to the member targeting early June of this year. And then really once we get past that stage with all things in place, we are really focusing on the board process. We envisage that will take a couple of months between setting up the process with clerks, running it, the intake process and the review of that, and hopefully we'll look to have that finalized in sort of late summer, early fall. At the same time, concurrently, we're still working through the service level agreements with all of the responsible departments around the city, such as facilities, finance, human resources. And then once we have that new board selection process done, we will be looking to do an onboarding and orientation process for the board. The new board members at the end of the year. We do have the final meeting of the board of this existing board of directors scheduled for December 1st. And we would anticipate that would be the final one. And then we'll be kicking off the new board, bringing them on for their initial meeting in the first quarter of next year.
Thanks very much, Adam. I'll lead off some of the questions if it's okay, and then turn over others. I have a fair number, but I'll keep them short as I can because we have a hard stop at 7. If people can get out a bit earlier and enjoy the sunshine, that's not a bad thing. My first question is about that new HFM board recruitment from July to September. According to the process right now that we use to select members, it goes through the selection committee. The selection committee is entirely people by councillors. And in case no one knows, we kind of have a line we draw at a certain point in the town's term where we say we're not doing more recruitment because there isn't adequate time to put the call out, get people to come in, do the interviews, and that kind of thing. So I think that's a red flag for me to say you might have to be adjusted, or you may have to have other people besides council doing the recruitment in the same auspices as the city clerk's office already has. That's up with idea, all the questions that are there. It's a very robust process, I will say. As someone who's been on it for 4 years now and done tons and tons of recruitment, I'll just say it's a robust process, so I'm just flagging that issue. Maybe someone has an answer about that.
Yeah, through the chair, and for those who don't know, yes, I'm the Chief Corporate Real Estate Officer, and yes, ultimately the market staff report through to me. I have been working with the clerk's office to try and figure out a way to actually accomplish this. We are looking at a number of different alternatives, and by the time we get to the sole shareholders meeting, we'll certainly have a recommendation to be made around this in terms of how, or at least some options around how to try and address those timelines. Certainly we recognize the constraints that the current city councilors may have with regards to the selection committee.
I get it. So you might put a composition together of counselors and other people, members of the board, whatever. Okay, great. You'll have a recommendation that for later. My only questions for the consultant are the following. It's with respect to the overall way you're structuring this board. And so for me, I think that it doesn't make much sense. I would like to hear your thoughts on it though. Before I get into a question about that, just to let everybody know, today is not the only time we have an opportunity to make recommendations about this, and we're not going to be putting motions forward today about this. The goal is today, a presentation. We get a chance to ask some questions of this person who's only going to be here today. At our next meeting, the board can put together some recommendations, work with the vendors association, whomever, right? The public, and then we can make recommendations to council. Ultimately, council will then approve or deny those recommendations. So just letting you know the process, because the next meeting is coming up on May 19th, right? So that will be when we come back here for those recommendations. This won't go to council till early June. If you want a copy of this presentation, it's available on the Market's website. If you need more information or want a printed copy, we can get one from you in the Market office. So it's a bit of a long document, to warn you, so we're not going to put out 100 copies, but for folks who need a copy, we can figure that out. So my question for you is primarily about the structure of the board. So I don't think, I'll start one at a time. Are you suggesting that staff have a vote at the board? Because again, that wouldn't be in the same way City Housing Hamilton does it, for instance. So trying to understand that process. Yeah, please, Mike.
Fighting unmuting, sorry. Thank you for the question through the chair. So as we're looking at this right now, what we are considering and we were thinking about was essentially having 7 public members, as I mentioned, and then we would have 1 city employee, 1 city council director, and 1 ex officio vendor representative. The thought process was that the city councilor would be the only person who would be, I'll say, abstaining from voting unless there was a tiebreaker. So to your question, the city council member could be a voting representative on the board if so desired, recognizing that that can at points place them in an awkward situation. So there had been conversation with the market leadership team about the role of voting as a city employee as well as voting as a city council member. We don't want to be putting anyone into potential conflicts of interest. One piece that is very important to note is when we strike a board as an MSC, anyone sitting on that board does have to have all their fiduciary responsibility in board meetings to the organization itself. So it can create awkward situations, but anyone who is on there should not be voting in what will give them the best personal interest, but rather what will be in the best interest of the organization itself. I know it's not a perfect answer to your question, but I think that answers some of it.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a total stickler here, but I've been known to be sometimes. Ex officio, I think, doesn't really apply here, to be fair. I think what you're just saying is that the person will be, because there's no office they're coming from, right? What you're saying, I think, here is just they'll be a non-voting member of the vendor community, and I presume that that'll be ironed out in terms of where that happens, if it's going to be someone from the Vendors Association that comes here and represents, like the chair, for instance, gets the same role that the chair has today as a non-voting member, or whatnot. I guess what I propose that makes more sense here is one thing we run into a lot at council or in other kinds of governing bodies I'm at is the nonsense of a tie. Now, of course, you can't predict how many people are going to show up at a meeting. So if there's supposed to be 9 members and 8 come and there's a 4-4 situation, then it's a tie and it's defeated on a tie, and that's not great. I don't think personally, though, that putting the councillor in a role of the only job they have is breaking a tie seems like a way to avoid controversy. It would seem actually to be a way to increase controversy, because then the councillor essentially would be making decisions when there was ties, and that is the opposite of what you're saying. I guess what I'm thinking about here is one area that is a lot of struggle I've seen in my time as a councillor and before as a community member is chairing meetings. That is a lot. It's a lot of, you have to know all the procedural rules. If someone does something wrong, you have to be able to know what it is. There's all kinds of expertise you have. Councillors are uniquely trained in this activity of chairing meetings. Some do it better than others, but the point is that might be a facilitator role that's non-voting for a councillor to be there and participate in. Not voting, their only job is just to chair the meeting, guide things, they don't bring motions. So I'm just putting that out there because that would then reduce the number of board members in total down to an odd number, right? I also don't think the city staff should vote. I think that's awkward for lots of reasons. But if you had those 7 voting members, as it were, and everybody else was there doing other roles, that would solve the problem. So I'm going to leave that there as just kind of a, do you have a problem with that? I think that's a bad idea, and trying to create an odd number if everyone's there.
So what I would say to that piece, and so part of the challenge that we wanted to try to avoid, and I'll speak first to your comment around the city council member. Part of the challenge we wanted to avoid was if and when the board has to go back to council and say, we want to do X, recognizing that sometimes there may be potential friction between what the farmers market feels is the most appropriate activity compared to what the city council would say this is what we would actually prefer you do instead. We wanted to avoid a situation where the board would say it's a unanimous decision, we want to go this way, and the rest of council looks at the one council member who is a part of the board and says, so you voted this way too? You voted against what you knew council would be hoping for, which is why we had that role of only in the event of ties, recognizing there's no real perfect scenario or structure here. But having that structure in a way so that ultimately, even as we engaged with other farmers markets and other MSCs, one of the things that we heard was try to take some people who may have other vested interests out of the board as best as possible. So, you know, if we looked at other MSCs as leading practices, one thing we heard, I'll say quite consistently and clearly, was don't have any staff, don't have any board members on there, and from farmers markets, don't have vendors. We can appreciate that thought process and that answer, because then you're just left with that skills-based board who's focused specifically on the market itself and then isn't potentially conflicted or having other issues or challenges. That is one possible way. However, as we look at the, I'll say, structure and the context and the norms of the city of Hamilton, we didn't feel it was appropriate to go, I'll say, that extreme. That's where that thought process related to voting or non-voting came in. It's not to say that it's absolutely perfect or it must be this way, but it's to say it's a way that we thought would reduce potential conflicts or reduce potential challenges for those council people or those members of the board.
So if I have it right, because I'm just thinking about my next meeting and proposing a recommendation, what I'm suggesting wouldn't really contravene what you're suggesting. You could still have 7 members be on the board. The non-voting members would be the council, the vendor, and the city employee, and that wouldn't create any conflicts based on the model you have there, if all of them were non-voting, because there'd be 7 members. If there was a tie on a day, I guess we'd have to just deal with the rules for a tie that we deal with everywhere else. If there were only 6 people showed up and it was 3-3, it would be defeated, and the councillor wouldn't be there breaking a tie. But that's not in contravention with what you were saying. Those are my only questions for now. The rest of it, I think, is something to think about. I think that, as far as I'm concerned, I do think it's good to have a councillor here. I do think it's good to have a city employee here as part of that function. I don't think they should vote. I do think that I will say to you that I've seen it happen just many, many, many times. It's day 1, meeting 1. The person who is being suddenly chair of that board is a citizen, and they're being asked to run the meeting. I've not seen it go well often. So very rarely does it go well. And there's, you know, some people can get training for that work, and that's fine if someone's willing to do so, but my experience is these things will happen quickly, and what happens is that you actually select the chair during the meeting, and then someone says, okay, you're the chair now, up you get. And that person is then meant to do what exactly? So I think there's got to be a buffer built in there if it's the first year, whatever it might be, that someone who's got that experience in a non-voting role can be in the chair is, I think, a smart idea. It doesn't polarize things, just make sure that everything gets directed in the right way and that it's run professionally, because I think that's a risk, is that things go off the rails because someone doesn't know the procedures or know what the rules are and know how to operate things. Anyways, I'll leave it there. Other questions from other members? I see Councillor Huang, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to really understand how money flows from MSC to through this new governance structure. Currently, we, as the board, work with staff on understanding what the budget looks like. That budget gets presented to council. Council then provides that via levy or whatever. So how would this MSC deal with that? How does funding work now?
Through the chair, fantastic question. Thank you for asking that, Councillor Huang. So the the structure right now, as you outlined it, is accurate. So right now, the market says, here's the budget I think we need. They work with finance to help develop that budget. The board approves it. It goes in as an ask to council. Council will ultimately approve or make tweaks as necessary and flow money through. The overarching process, I'll say right now, is not intended or not expected to change. And what I mean by that is, as we engaged with leadership and others, one thing we heard relatively frequently was, at present, within the next 5-year cycle, there's no expectation that the farmers market is going to be completely financially sustainable and or operate alone. So that overarching goal or that overarching process of a budget being made with finance, being presented to the board, being presented to council, and then money flowing back would maintain. However, through the business plan and the increased stall revenues and increased programming and other elements like that, the hope and the goal is that we can reduce the amount that is needed to be provided to at least hit a break-even level and get to a point where, if and as there are broader or potentially excess revenues, I'll position it that way, that can either be passed back to the city and or reinvested into the market to continue to increase that that vendor experience, that visitor experience as we go. I'll say some MSCs, potentially different contexts, do operate in a financially self-sustainable manner. Some do not. It's really dependent on the shareholders' directive and the intent and goal of their sole shareholder.
Okay. Then how does
Roy,
it...
1 second, just, Ray wanted to also respond.
Okay.
So through the chair, let me I'll just amplify that a little bit or clarify that a little bit. Currently, the market is treated very much like another department, right? And so a directive is given, you need to meet this target, go get it. This year actually was the first time where we've started to, I'll say, and you know, the chair actually was instrumental in actually bringing a budget to council, very much akin to what you might see like a conservation authority or City Housing Hamilton or Police Services Board or those. They establish the budget that works for them. They go to council and they ask council for a particular amount of money. Council can say no, at which point they need to go back and figure out how to adjust their budget accordingly. But they're making an ask based on a business plan, not based on a, I'll say I hate to say it's arbitrary, but I'll just say a directive that was given that didn't think about what the market may or may not need. So this year, as an example, we went forward with not just what the original finance directed target was, but said, hey, we have some unique needs and we have some unique financial requirements. And so in addition to what we're directed to do, we're making this ask. And fortunately, this year, council approved that ask. And, you know, some of that direct, the direct output of that was the increased security, as an example. So in the new model, it's going to be much more akin to this way of doing it. We develop the model in the market. We figure out what we need and what we need of council in order to support the market, and then we go and pitch it to council. And council can then decide how much they want to support the market or not support the market based on that. It's a bit of a nuance, of course, because we're already an MSC, right? We just haven't been acting like that up until recently.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the other MSCs that I sit on, and it's all of the other MSCs have very different models, so this is why I wanted to get that clarity today and help me understand. So with moving to a 7-person community member board structure, how does the fiduciary responsibilities work? Because if you have potentially one councillor that doesn't have a vote, how does that work then? Can you just help me understand because fiduciary responsibility is a pretty heavy term, especially if you're looking at it's going to be volunteer-based, it's going to be community citizens. Having that responsibility as a fiduciary governor may be a really big ask. So just help me understand that a little bit more, please.
Sure, thank you. So through the chair, in terms of that structure and the way that that would operate, so we have developed and provided to the city leadership team of the market a skills matrix that we've defined. And so that would then, I'll say, start to identify key skills or expectations of members of the public who would be joining this board. So it's not necessarily to suggest that you would have people with no experience or just a casual interest in the market as joining, but rather you would have people who are bringing skills, potential expertise on other boards or other governance settings or other specific areas that the board would benefit from. Now, in terms of that fiduciary responsibility piece that you're raising, ultimately, part of why we want to have community members doing this or on this board as opposed to potential vendors or stallholders or having voting rules for city councilors or other groups would simply be that we don't want to create a potential conflict there. So if you are a member of the public and let's say you have a marketing background that the city and the board feels would be appropriate and beneficial for the board, we want that individual to join the board. We want them to be able to participate in it, but recognize that when they're then providing their vote on a strategic option or when they're providing their expertise in their specific area, they're doing so in a way that is not to their immediate benefit and or the detriment of anyone else that they would potentially be knowing or working with. And that's really what we mean when we're talking about this. And that would be part of how we would be reviewing candidates and or how we would be selecting board members. Because if we have individuals who are operating from a perspective of, okay, we have two options, we can go left or right. Left will be slightly better for me and my business. Right would be slightly worse for me. We don't want that thought process even really coming in. We want it to be what's best for the market, for achieving our strategic objectives, for the vendors, and for the visitors to the market.
Thanks very much. We do have one more item on our agenda after this, so if there's any other questions, I'll take a couple, but I want to get on to the next part. You have a hard stop at 7 o'clock? Yeah, Shane.
Oh, hi, Mike. Yeah, you brought up a lot of great details on this. There's a couple of key issues I have. I'll just introduce myself. We're a family business, multi-generational. I'm actually the oldest business in probably Ontario, but in Hamilton since the market started. And I've been on the board for 8 years, the previous board members plus these board members. And I think for me, the selection of the citizens has been an issue, and I was kind of hoping some information more could go to City Council at the same time. The first board, the citizens, they were very engaged. Eric Miller was our treasurer and secretary, and he was fantastic. He's still a market shopper. But the others were not really market shoppers, and so when you have a problem with fiduciary duty or for vendors potential conflict of interest. We always had city staff here, and city staff would call in the city lawyer, or the vendor would leave the room. That's the way they usually dealt with it. We never set our own rents. It was always city staff made a recommendation, and then the citizens would discuss it. And we were always we never voted against saying what the manager said. So what my key problem with the citizens is that not all of them have the vendors may have a conflict of interest in certain situations, but the citizens always lack in having that strong interest for success of the market. And I don't think that's easily overcome. And so I have a strong concern about 7 citizens. A lot of them do it for good on their resume, maybe retired, something to do. Working at a car dealership, being a manager of a car dealership success doesn't really translate to standing behind a table for 10, 12 hours on your feet trying to pay the bills. So there is disconnect there, what translates from one business to another. And our current model is the we already have a professional market manager, we have a market manager, but we also have marketing staff, and they're already doing a great job. So it doesn't and they're in-depth knowledge of the market because they've now been here for a period of time. So it doesn't always make sense to say, well, we're going to bring in a marketing person. So for us, if we did go right now, also I think there was some information missing, when your company was first retained, they first polled the last citizens, which a lot of work did get done. There was some, tensions, but that's part of just bringing forward ideas. And then we had this new board come, and I think we've all had a good relationship. I think our relationship with the councillors is good. We like this model where we're able to come directly to councillors and talk about, well, we like policies. Generally, we agree. I don't think we've ever had anything we said, no, we disagree and you agree. That I don't think that's ever happened with this previous board. And our citizens, nice people. Matthew comes regularly to the market, so he's good and he's been very dedicated, but we can see all of these citizens have left recently. So when this policy goes forward to these changes, I think City Council also needs to look at, well, why did these group of citizens leave? And I think maybe it's because they felt it was kind of just advisory. They weren't steering anything. That's my guesses. I don't have the background of why they left. So for us as vendors, we think that I have a lot of experience. Everybody who works here has a lot of experience. We would prefer to have 2 people here, so we have a diversity of thought. Some people are producers of a restaurant, some people are produce. But we do have concerns about the number of citizens and their qualifications. I think the number one qualification is that they shop at the market and they like the market, or they've been to other markets. But other industries, we wouldn't have, at a hospital, people that weren't in a hospital and understand that setting working at the hospital, on the hospital board or on an aviation board. We're a little different than tourism. We're a little different than Hamilton Housing, is that we're businesses, individual businesses, and we're, our main goal for any of us that come is to see the market successful. So I would just like to add that. And then for Cameron, I brought it up before, February 20th, 2004, council had we made a recommendation to raise our own rent by 3%, which equaled about $14,000 a year. And council passed a directive at that time that said the Stallholders Association, the manager in consultation with the Stallholders Association, we could have some input on our advertising. So we've raised our own rent in that. And I would like, through Cameron, that someday we do discuss that council did prove that with the Stallholders Association. So I'd just like to add that to wherever this goes. Thank you.
Yeah, fair. I'll just make a couple comments and move on to our next item. I'll say that most of the people I know who left the market did so for really good reasons that had nothing to do with the market. So, I'm not going to tell you what those were. People told me that just in private. We don't really just divulge those things, but they weren't sort of for reasons of feeling like it was an advisory or some other kind of thing, for the most part. So, secondly, to your question about what happened in 2004, I'll be very blunt with you and say I have no idea what the market structure looked like compared to what it looks like now and what we're planning to do in 2004. Like that date, I don't have it in my brain. But that may determine whether or not that's an actionable thing or not. Like City Council did all kinds of things. City Council made all kinds of motions in 18, whatever it was, when the market, certain things happen with the market, but there's a moratorium on certain policies and procedures, and so I don't know what that looks like. When you go to a new board model, and when new terms of council come in, some things stick, some things don't stick, they go away. So it doesn't mean that vendors still can't participate in that discussion, but to your point earlier, I think one of the challenges we have is when we bring people onto the board and then ask them to have the same expertise that staff has, that's a problem too, right? Because you have a marketing person on the board, now you have marketing people and staff. If they don't agree on the issues, how do you resolve those? And so I think that's also something to think about. So what you're saying, I think, is maybe at the next meeting, you might want to bring some recommendations forward about what that looks like. So you're welcome to do that. At this point, I want to receive the presentation if it's okay. You have a question, Jeff? Okay, go ahead.
Through the chair, it's a question to Mike. Thank you, Mike, for that presentation. I was looking over the document, and there is something with regards to the market rates review. And it basically, in that, it basically states things like we're looking at a market rate that for rent, and that it seems that with this document anyways that we're not at that rate right now. And I would just like to comment right now that, I don't know what constitutes the market rate then for, like, how are we getting that rate? Are we looking at the downtown core. We're looking at other retail or to get to that rate. And I say that only because Jackson Square, their rate is approximately $5 less than our premium rate. So that's something that is that was a bit alarming when I checked with them just the other day. So the rates it's quite lower, and if we're going ahead and we're increasing our rate in this 5-year plan, that's going to really make a difference between our rate and somebody that an institution that's right next door to us. But if I can just have you comment just on that market rates review, because this particular section states things like looking at a cashless, it says we're looking at a progress toward a cashless transactions with, will further strengthen revenue and reduce risk. Is this cashless as in all the vendors would then no longer accept cash, or? Yes, that would be my one question.
Sorry, there are two questions you had. One question was about the market rate review and how that'll be conducted, and the second was about cashless transactions?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, you got those two questions, right?
Yep, thank you. So in terms of the market rates review, for reference, so our team looked at comparable retail rates in, I think it was Hamilton, but also Burlington, to come up with that. Now, one of the key pieces in the next steps part of this that when we had spoken with Ray and Adam was having a retail consultant come in and do a lease rate review or a square foot rate review. So that is something where, based on our review of it, we saw that there were some elements that were potentially below. Now, Jeff, I'm not suggesting that what you said around Jackson Square is incorrect or false. But it was more as we looked at more broadly where were there potential pieces. Now, in terms of that. Cashless item, it was essentially looking at how do we, as we think to the future, as we think to the operations of the market, are there elements or are there pieces that would align potentially with how individuals shop today? And if I understood correctly, I believe you yourself are also a vendor. I'm sure you've seen from some of your patrons a reduction in cash transactions and an increase in whether it's credit, debit, other things along those lines. So it's not to suggest that, as an example, today's April 21st, April 25th, we are now moving to cashless, but it's to suggest that as we look at this and as we consider this from a revenue and a risk perspective, is there an opportunity to potentially increase, I'll say, accountability and increase visibility of transactions, but then at the same time as well, reduce risk. And risk can even be things like potential for having money go missing, or I'll say nefarious individuals, things along those lines. That's where that thought process was coming from. As I mentioned, it is not from the perspective to say it is an immediate term piece, and it is something that would be explored and further reviewed by the market as it continues to move forward.
Thanks very much. We are up against our time here, so I'm going to be moving to the next thing. I know that we'll pass around Mike's email in case board members or anyone on the board has a question they want to ask Mike for more clarity, if that's okay. And we'll move on to our next item. So at this point, we're going to receive these three items all together, 5A, 5B, and 5C. So I'll need a mover to do that. Sorry,
excuse me. We need to accept the items.
Yeah, we're doing that right now. Yep. Just need a mover. Councillor Huang, seconded by, I'll second that to move it along. Any discussion about receiving items A, B, and C under 5? No, even though we haven't gotten to C yet, so never mind. I jumped the gun. So we're going to wait a moment and hold off on that vote until we get to 5C. Sorry, I got excited. Adam is going to briefly speak to us now about the fall 2026 York Boulevard activation. Go ahead.
Certainly, I can do that. I just wanted to, Matt did have his hand up there. I know I wasn't sure if it was related to the previous
item. Oh, I'm so sorry, Matt. I didn't see that, and I think our consultant has left, so you have my apologies. We can connect you with him. Sorry. When your camera's not on and you raise your hand, it doesn't actually show up, so we don't see you, unfortunately. I'm sorry. go ahead, Adam.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go through this quickly so we end on time. So staff have been working on plans for a fall activation, I call it, up at the York Boulevard space. You can see here on the slide here, we'll give some details on it, what we've got in the works. But really, this is something that we'll be targeting for pretty much from Labor Day to Thanksgiving, encompassing Supercrawl and one of the busier times at the market, the harvest season. And what we're really looking for here, to be consistent with, well, many aspects of the approved vision for the market is really the goal that really we want to look at how can the market better engage with the streetscape, engage with York Boulevard. The guiding principles call for the market spilling out onto the street, engaging with that, much more of a presence there. Looking at opportunities to try and do new and innovative things and increase the profile of the market in the public's eye. And certainly, there's a lot of efforts that have been made in and around York Boulevard. There's a lot of issues that we're dealing with down there, but we also have things such as the TD Coliseum launch. And there's a lot of opportunity opening up for itself to really raise the profile of the market out there. Also, we have the York Boulevard space. We've done a lot to increase programming there, but we're also looking at opportunities to strengthen the actual market activity up there, revenue generation potential, opportunities for vendors, opportunities for pop-ups, and such. So what we were already working on was really to how could we activate this space for a brief period in the fall. But the opportunity also arose that we, with the new downtown revitalization strategy, which was passed by council last week, we've been engaging with the commercial districts and small business office, who was leading that in the same department that I fall under. And that group was very interested in ways that we could utilize the market as an asset in the downtown core and really sort of work on enhancing its profile, and looking at ways to activate York Boulevard, and not just during TD Coliseum events, but definitely looking at opportunities for outside of regular market hours, evening opportunities, which are also specified in the vision. So what we've come together with, and I'll take you really briefly through it, is a layout and a sort of an idea of a 5-week harvest festival theme that we would want to run there, running for five full market weeks, starting on a Wednesday, that's September 9th, just before Supercrawl kicks off, and ending on the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend. What we're looking for here is to increase seating up in the area, opportunities for people to linger more, to engage in York Boulevard in a nice time of year, in a welcoming space, and something that's actually quite eye-catching and interesting for people passing by on York Boulevard, understanding and really putting the market back on the map as a destination and a place to be interested in downtown. So what we've been working through here is that, and also the ways that we can make the York Boulevard space much more modular and flexible to set up for different uses. We have had a lot of success with more programming. We want to be able to still operate programming there, whether it be the kids club and such, but we also want to be able to convert it in a much more cost-effective and labor efficient way into a space that could actually host vendors and really take advantage of TD Coliseum events, Supercrawl, other opportunities that arise. So that's really what we're working on here in a very quick way. What we're going to be doing is that we see that we can fit 5 stalls in the space. We see an opportunity there for there to be about 25 vendor spots available over the 5-week period. What we're planning on doing now is sending out an expression of interest form to all existing vendors with the opportunity for them to see if they're interested in engaging in the space, setting up there for a week, and what they would like to propose and see how they would want to utilize the space. We plan to run that process for the next couple of weeks, and on May 10th we would close that off and really assess what level of interest do we already have from our existing vendors, and then do we look to go external. We think that there's interesting opportunities. Obviously there's stuff that could be offered in the market, in the space, that isn't offered there now. But we'll see where we stand, obviously offering first opportunity to existing vendors to see what they would like to do up in that space. Really what we're looking for is some interesting things. We're looking for stuff that really we already offer so many great things in the market, but what other opportunities, what other things are we missing? What other things have vendors been interested in trying, don't have space for, might want to expand and try out as a trial? And ideally, we're looking for some level of alignment with this harvest theme, and that's really what we would look at. We are looking at the possibility, obviously, one of the big pieces, and this was definitely a focus from the downtown revitalization strategy side of things, was really being able to engage the space during TD Coliseum events and other evening times. One of those pieces that we're looking at is it actually feasible to have alcohol sales as part of that, as trying to catch people as they're passing from the parking area, walking up. We know that a lot of other bars and restaurants and existing commercial activities, and certainly within the Coliseum, are taking advantage of a lot of people coming into town, spending money on food, enjoying their evening before they go to the concert. And do we have an opportunity to piggyback on that and gain some of that for local businesses, market vendors, and for the market itself? What we're looking for here, of course, we're doing this as a pilot, and luckily we have the support of the downtown revitalization strategy and the budget that they've associated with it, so a lot of the costs are covered for us to be doing these upgrades. Therefore, we're not really looking for it to be a big revenue driver for the market right now. It's a pilot, it's a trial to see what sort of traction do we get. We'd really like people to be able to take a chance on this and really lower that risk for any vendors that we have. So we're proposing that really what we're looking for vendors that would pay 10% of their sales revenue. There would be zero risk for you to set up if you want to, if you're a sole proprietor. If you want to be there as a vendor, obviously you might need to hire staff, but we're trying to keep the overhead as low as possible. If you do well, then wonderful. If you don't do well, we want you obviously to lower the risk as much as possible. We see this as an opportunity to trial something new in that regards. And also the very key part of this is all of this data that we're doing in terms of the investment we're making, the initiative that's going on, will need to be reported back to the State of the Downtown report that's done by that office. So we really do need to track the economic viability of these investments. So therefore, we need to be able to track what the sales were. How much investment did we put in? How much can we realistically expect that would come out of this? So these are the two pieces of the fee structure, the rationale behind that. In a nutshell, this is what we have as a concept. I know we're short of time. We're really working with a local company, doing some greening on the street, really trying to make a welcoming and interesting space, something that's eye-catching, that catches people's eye. Really utilizing the barn as really an interesting piece, obviously a great feature outside the market that people are familiar with, and a way that we can bridge the outside and the inside, and frankly make York Boulevard a more hospitable and interesting place to spend time. It's not actually the most attractive place, as you're probably aware of, in terms of traffic going by. This is what we're looking at here as all live plantings and seating, and this seating is very resilient. Obviously, we know we have to manage safety and issues around this in the space. So this is something that we're working on as a design concept. Utilizing the opening of the doors, we would be opening 2 of the 4 sliding doors during the day. We will have additional staffing security on site to manage the space and support the vendors that are in the space and the program that will go on. In the last slide, very quickly, this is just a very simple SketchUp mark of how we see the space actually working. So you can see here, space for 5 vendors. There's really just 1 on the left-hand side there at the market entrance, 2 in the center, 2 at the other end, side by side, by the storage area. We really see that the first one on entry and the 4 other 2 on the other end are best suited for food service vendors due to the proximity to power and potential proximity to some water supply in the storage area in the back. We'll be installing a sink. And the inside sections there, those 2 vendors really have opportunities to be a lot more flexible, but less tied into servicing needs. The 2 sliding doors are just roughly marked there. That's where people would be coming in and out of the space along with the main entrance space. Access to the washrooms would be opened up, and obviously maintaining any sort of fire exit and such. So in a very really overview way, that's exactly what we're looking at right now for the fall. Happy to answer any questions.
Hi, through the chair. Adam, with regards to the fee structure, 10% of sales, I mean, that's not going to be, with regards to the vendors, I could say that, I mean, that basically, the idea of reporting sales isn't something that the vendor community will, I don't think will be happy about or interested in. Is there any other way of doing any kind of other fees for that, or?
I'd be happy to have some conversation about it through the chair. Certainly the issue that we're looking for here is, one of them, we're trying to mitigate financial risk for anyone taking a chance on the space. It's an unproven pilot. So in that one, the other side is we very much will have to track this. The investment that has been made externally to support this, very much we need to be able to report back on the effectiveness of it. So if there's another model that we want to look at, happy to discuss it. But in terms of our existing, where we just rent a space and we have no record of what's gone on transactionally, and we have no idea whether it's worked or not, other than anecdotally, is not something we can go with, but I'm happy to discuss somewhere in between.
Sure.
Through the chair, thank you. Just with regards to the evening beer and wine sales, who would we be looking for a vendor to, I mean, you're looking at a liquor license and for an event, would the market be doing that, or would we be trying to find a vendor who would then go ahead and do something like that?
Through the chair, as it stands, we'd be looking for, we would not be looking to have the space licensed by the market. We would be looking for someone with a catering license, and we know that there are some in the area. I'm not sure if any of our existing vendors have that, or if they'd be working in partnership with someone who does.
The other option, of course, is getting a special event permit, which is pretty routine for selling alcohol. Okay, on that, I don't see further. Oh, Matthew, sorry, go ahead.
Through the chair, yeah, thanks, Adam, for that update. I think it's intriguing, the ways in which the market can spill out to York Street is always a bit compelling, and I think certainly those large open doors, I think sliding doors, have been quite successful in recent years with concerts. I am concerned about the potential impact of the construction that's going on the residential building / hotel on the other side of the street, which could potentially, I think, impact the vibe, for lack of a better word, of the space. Do we know if construction will be complete at that point?
Through the chair, from our reports that we've heard back, that should be completed by September. So we are in a good state there where that scaffolding should be down and we shouldn't be dealing with a lot of significant external work by that time.
Thanks very much. Okay, oh, you have a question? Okay, last question of the meeting. It's yours.
I just wanted to know about the road. Are we planning to take a lane? Because that girl looked like it's like the sidewalk of the busy roads. So you're planning to take an extra lane?
Through the chair, no, actually, we can utilize the depth of the sidewalk there. That concept drawing is relatively accurate, but that only actually comes to the edge of the curb. There's adequate space between the curb and the market to not need to touch the road.
I was a vendor in that window for a year. I did really well. I liked it up there. I understand the dynamics of it. I do think that's a little short, because we've looked at vendors. They had to put their table like right against the glass because the safety of people stepping on the road. I think there's maybe some issue. That's a concept design, but I do think there's maybe some warning. There's some issue there. And also, when we approve this presentation, does that mean we approve the 10%?
No, we're not approving it. It's an item for information.
Yeah.
There's no approval
I think there's other metrics you can use, such as vendor retention and stuff. When the city wants to start looking inside our books, I find it's an issue a little bit, and I didn't want to open the door to that. I just don't rent out the space. Is there interest? Do vendors keep coming because it's working? Like, I think there's other fee structures we come with, but of course we want to spill out into the road in the summer. I agree with that.
Yeah, if I have it right, there's 2 different periods of time, right? There's the initial intake, and if there's not interest from vendors, then going externally. But I think what Adam said was he's happy to chat with the Vendors Association about other fee models if they exist and what might work for people. So I'll leave that for you folks to discuss offline because we're not approving this today. It's a report for information. On that note, I'll need a mover and seconder to receive all 3 of these reports. Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Matthew LaRose. All those in favor of receiving, show of hands. Thank you very much. On that, we are moving 9A to our next agenda as we're out of time. It's not urgent. And we have no notices of motions and motions. The motions we've done already earlier in the agenda. Our next meeting is May 19th, at which time if we want to bring forward recommendations with respect to the governance review, the business plan, everything we've seen there, we can do so. As we discussed, staff will be coming back with answers to questions from delegates in June. That's pretty much the summary of the meeting for me. Otherwise, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good day.
Accept a question from the floor? No. We all showed up for Jancy Cheese, and we don't know if they're actually, there's an action against them that, I don't know if the pending reports will affect.
The board did not change the policy today.